We're back again, September 14th, 2016. It's your second weekly edition of the Line Sports Talk podcast, brought to you by our good friends at Sunday Swim. Joined by a special guest here tonight. We're going to talk a little fantasy football, namely the daily fantasy football. This guy's actually done a great job of winning and beating the system here over the last couple of seasons. He's got about 3 years worth of practice at it, and I wanted to bring him in to share some stuff. But other than that, it should be a quick one tonight. Got a couple questions I want to answer for a few friends out there, and I don't know if we're going to be able to get to them, but we should. If we don't answer them tonight, we'll get to them by Saturday afternoon show. So without further ado and hesitation, let's get the whole thing started. Introduce a friend of mine, Mr. Fantasy Guru, Red Hot, Harbor Mike. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Tommy. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. I'm doing good. Thanks for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. Everybody out there is going to appreciate it. You had yourself one hell of a week, fantasy sports-wise, and it's not the first time you've done it. You could write it off to beginner's luck if it was, but I think you got a system, and I want to hear a little bit about it. I mean, what's your approach? I mean, I know that you have a favorite site that you use, and you can say their name. They don't mind.
Yeah, I can't say their name. Is that what you said?
No, you can. You go ahead. They don't care.
Okay, yeah. I like FanDuel. That's what I use. I don't think I've done DraftKings before, and it's a little difficult because they have the flex spot, which now you're looking back into. What we want to do is have the fewest choices possible in any given thing. That's the ultimate goal here, because we're picking. You know, like if we're doing lottery numbers, we're picking. So it's difficult on DraftKings because they have that spot. So now you're looking at what extra receiver, running back, tight end should I start, and it's just not worth it. So you won't. I don't think you'll win too much on that site. FanDuel is geared more towards our typical, what I've traditionally done for the last 15, 16 years of playing fantasy.
Sure, and just to run it down, the difference is the additional flex spot in DraftKings, and DraftKings also does not have you select a kicker. You forego the kicker position. That's where the flex comes in, and you still have a defense in both, but FanDuel gives you the quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and a tight end. So it is a pretty standard format.
And I like that because a lot of times the kicker, while you can be surprised, and it happens all the time, but the kicker is something you can gauge with some sort of accuracy, whereas that flex spot on DraftKings, good luck. And then trying to figure it in with how much it costs you is, whereas when you follow this FanDuel is pretty easy template. I noticed, like, when I first started messing with it, I was able to put together a decent team, and it wasn't hard or frustrating. I've racked my brain at DraftKings and just decided, while they do have more money, at least the last time I played it, they were offering a lot more money. You were playing with 250,000 people each Sunday in the games I was playing with, and it just, again, it wasn't worth it. You know, with FanDuel, I'm going for 6 figures a lot of times on Sundays, and it's less than 100,000 people that you're competing with.
Okay,
so that right there is big. You know.
So I've happened to have more luck on DraftKings, and I'm going to equate a lot of it to luck, no matter what. In anything, it's gambling. You walk into the casino and you have to assume that right away you are at a disadvantage. And the same thing here. It takes something special to actually to break down and get to a win. But tell me a little bit about your process. We had discussed earlier that you like to have some framework and a skeleton to a lineup. So are you looking at matchups? Is that your driving motivation behind how you?
I look at a combination of things. The first thing I like to do is I like to look at the spreads and just see, because Vegas rarely gets it wrong. So I like to use them as an idea of just, okay, they think there's over 45, over 50 points, and that's the high water mark this week for, let's say, Oakland and New Orleans last week.
That's the example I was thinking of. That was a 51.5-point line, and they blew that to pieces.
Oh, yeah, and perfect example. It was the highest one, if I'm not mistaken, or one of the top 3 by just a few points. So with easy choice to see, especially when I was surprised that Oakland didn't get more touchdowns, but they still got the yardage, and if you started Derek Carr, you could have won. You could have won it all with him as your quarterback.
Sure.
So overall, and obviously, the reason why I lost big, or not big, but I would have won big had I taken the New Orleans receivers. I was surprised that they outworked Amari Cooper.
Now, let me ask you. I know that in DraftKings, especially when you get into the GPP contest, and for the layman out there, that's the guaranteed prize pool. When you get into those bigger tournaments, it does matter what percentage of people in that league have particular players. So, for example, Brandon Cooks was probably only owned, and I'm throwing a guess out there because I really don't know. Was he owned by 25%, 40%? Was he owned by a high number of people in the league, or a lower percentage? Do you know?
It was lower because obviously he wasn't. He's one of those guys that's not on people's radars yet. I think by the mid of this season, or even probably 2 more games, people will know he's the guy to start.
Sure.
And then he will be something that you really can't. But then there's the flip side. There are, depending on, and this is where it gets kind of intricate, there are times when you must have that guy or you're not winning. So it doesn't matter if you didn't start Antonio Brown, you weren't going to win.
For the Sunday, Monday. Okay, so that leads me to something. So when you take your framework, you're looking at the spreads, and you gauge everything, and it's very logical. For example, the New Orleans-Oakland game, it's a 51.5-point number. You have to immediately just assume that this game's going to be points. Whereas looking at the Baltimore-Buffalo line last week, there's no way in hell that you should have had a player from either one of those teams on your roster. There's no way.
No, they always match up, although there was a case for an argument that
LaShawn McCoy?
Yeah, or Sammy Watkins was starting to get really hot. He was one of those. Was he trying to? Was he on the same trajectory that Brandon Cooks is on? But I think Sammy Watkins is hurt, and again he's questionable because of his foot. So I think
he is. Isn't it amazing how the NFL and NFL coaches, they keep the horse in the barn as long as they possibly can, and then after a week on the field, people looked at Sammy Watkins and went, there's something wrong with him. That guy can fly, and say he can't, and now the horse is out of the barn, and Sammy Watkins should probably fall off your radar in daily fantasy and in regular fantasy until further notice. And to answer one of our listeners' questions about Tyrod Taylor this week, Thursday night against the Jets, division game, I got to go no. I think if you have a better option, you're not starting Tyrod Taylor. An injured Sammy Watkins or a gimpy Sammy Watkins, no way. What do you think?
Well, I'll do you one better. I would say in either fantasy or in daily fantasy or in your league, your 10, 12, whatever it is league, I would say that always, unless you have to, or it's a star player and it's just a no-brainer, Antonio Brown on any stage, you start him. If you got him and you could afford him, whatever. I would avoid Thursday night games.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, they never live up to the hype. They have a short week. Everyone's beat up. They've had no practice time to get ready for the next team, so the playbook is reduced. You always get let down if you think you're star. Now, again, there is one flip side. If you have a stud running back, a lot of times they'll succeed because it's easy to give a guy a ball and just tell him to run straight. You know?
Yeah, and you know exactly why I'm laughing because, and I've broken this down ad nauseum. I've lost sleep over this, but last Thursday night I've whined about this a dozen times already on this show. Last Thursday night I benched C.J. Anderson against Carolina. It cost me week one.
Well, a week one Thursday night, again, you have different. One here that's like the first Sunday game. That's everyone's watching it, you know, and that's why Monday night games are usually the opposite. They have the extra day to prepare. They have the extra day to rest. It's on the national stage. Everyone's at home watching them. You got to remember, these people are egotistical. They're all stars in their own mind, so they all want to shine. So they will put out more effort when they know, 20 more million people are watching than just their homers.
Well, I think there's just a lot of juice flowing through your veins, too, when you know the stage is even bigger, the lights are even brighter on a Monday night. But yeah, you bring up a good point and it's important to note in the NFL, these are grown men who are getting the hell beaten out of them on a Sunday, and if they're going to go back out and play Thursday night, it's just that extra couple days does make a tremendous difference in the body clock, rest, travel, all those things. So yeah, Thursday night in the middle of the season is a real bitch, and I do try to avoid it. I'm glad you mentioned it, but the one thing you mentioned prior to that was don't bench your studs. And that's one of those fantasy buzzes around here that we'll talk about often. You just do not, under any circumstance, bench your studs, because if you're like me and you bench your stud on Thursday night, C.J. Anderson, and it costs you the game. You're just
right. No, they are studs for a reason. Again, only in if there's injury or there's something going on that you're concerned. But yeah, you drafted him for a reason on your group, and daily, the guy is who he is. So unless there's certain matchups, well, you're now starting to see how Adrian Peterson was shut out week 1.
Yeah,
so,
he was a complete and total fantasy dud.
Yeah, you have to take into
19 carries, 31 yards.
Yeah, I again look at the fire under somebody, how young they are, what their motivations are. Not that he doesn't have motivations to do great every Sunday.
I think he was the victim of a hell of a defense that just they were eating his lunch. They was picked apart. They dared Sean Hill to throw the ball, and he just couldn't. Peterson will be okay.
I would agree on that. I think you'd had a completely different game had Teddy Bridgewater not been hurt.
I think so. I think Peterson will be okay. It may take some time for him to hit a stride, but he's going to be okay. He's not going to be great. He's not going to be AP of 5 years ago ever again.
I don't know if I like him so much this week, depending on what daily fantasy you're doing. Only because, again, he's so expensive, and there's just better options, cheap. And
I think there are better options out there. And speaking of better options, there's something I like to point out as well. And in a lot of the daily fantasy talk, I find that it behooves you to enter these single-entry contests. I really can't stress this enough. When you enter the multi-entries and there's 3 maximum entries, that's not a bad thing. When there's 10 maximum entries, that's not a bad thing. But when you see some of these, and I don't know if you're familiar because you are a FanDuel patron most of the time, DraftKings in particular has these 150 maximum entries. Mm-hmm. And you'll look at the winners board and you'll see these names that have 150 lineups. They eat up the entire winner aisle. You, as a guy who's entering 1 or 2 times, I don't believe has any chance of fitting into that window. So I can't stress enough. Little hot tip, if anybody wants it.
Let me stop you right there. If you're only going to enter 1 or 2 lineups, you're never going to win. I mean, You're going to get lucky maybe, but you're never going to win because, again, this is still, you have to commit a good strategy in how I started was I committed a certain amount of money, a few $100, that I was totally, like anything. If you go to the casino, if you brought it there, you're willing to lose it all and go home and you still can pay your bills.
Sure.
So
I
committed that
anyway.
amount of money. I was willing to lose it. We got to a point to where I entered the games that aren't as challenging, that don't draw as much, that pay, because all of them are different on how they'll pay you out. But you're a sucker to enter the ones that are you and a few other people and put $100 in, and it seems like a good deal. Those guys are going to kill you. There's sharks and the minnows in this, and if nothing else, build up enough money to where you could spend $250 on a Sunday and do 10 lineups for the big 100,000 or 200,000 payout on FanDuel. And then they have a bunch of different ones too. Like what I like to do is there's the Sunday-Monday game, and they had that every week until the